There we go. All right. We're gonna keep everything going. Time remaining. Okay, well, we have a clock, and we're gonna ignore that. Your progress is saved automatically as you play. Click here to delete your save game and restart. Click here. Oh, this is the map. Oh, this is the map and how you get places. Excellent. Okay, well, let's get through this. Yeah, it's very tricky. Failing to succeed does not mean failing to progress. Thank you. So the visuals, this game is very, very colorful, obviously, and very heavily founded in visuals. You can see that the colors are used to denote sort of like areas. And also, you'll notice, it's also very weird that shift is crouch. You'll also notice that this talks about failing to succeed does not mean failing to progress. That obviously links up to what we just did. We jumped, we didn't make it across the thing. So we're going. We're gonna go through this early stuff, hopefully kind of quick, because some paths are clearer than others. Okay, so that's like the hint, I suppose. So this is kind of a classic hallway problem. We can either take the red path or the blue path. Now, there may be context later that makes that make sense, but the player decision in this moment is red path, blue path. I don't know how the colors affect gameplay decisions. It would be something that we want to... This is actually a good example of where you'd want gameplay metrics, because this would be really interesting to see if, like, the colors themselves actually influence how varied the choices are. Like, if you end up... For example, if you did like light blue, do you get 65% of people going to light blue, but if you do dark blue, it's closer to 50-50? I don't know. Let's do blue. And also up versus down, that's also another factor. Choice may be as simple as going left or going right, so they're, yeah. And then they give it to you again. So now you're making it, so it's kind of like a meta thing, right? They make you like aware of the fact that this is effectively the hallway problem. And then it says the choice may be as simple as going left or right. In this case, I think it's probably fair to assume that most players would go right a second time, but it would actually be another thing that'd be really interesting to see the data on, because obviously I don't know. But it'd be really interesting to see if like the players go the same direction they went the first time when they are encountered with it again. And also, whether or not going through the red or blue path even mattered, if you go through here at all, like you have to go through the thing a certain number of times, could be the thing. So let's go through the red path. And now you have this. Okay, so the choice doesn't matter if the outcome is the same. So probably... So you've got a very clear choice, and it talks about how, some paths are clearer than others, and I think this is... Yes. So the actual solution is to turn around and go the opposite direction. So this is actually a good example of using the hallway problem in an interesting way. They know they're using the hallway problem, they understand that it's the hallway problem, and they also understand that if a player goes up against, is like beating their head against the brick wall, right, continuously doing the same thing and getting no result, they're going to eventually stop doing that. That's basic operant conditioning. Behavioral extinction, the behavior extinction, stuff like that. And then also combined with the clue of sometimes some paths are clearer than others, that puts the player's mindset in this place of like, I should look for an alternative solution. And really the only thing you have is to go backwards. And this also is going to prime you for later for when the solutions to the problems tend to be very nonlinear, tend to be very lateral. Like it's a game about lateral thinking, essentially. Not like structured logical thinking, but more like abstract thinking, abstract reasoning. And this is a good way you could define that. If you wanted to make a game about abstract reasoning, you could define that by saying, I want the player to have to find solutions to the puzzles where progression relies on their ability to think a little bit differently than they normally would have. And we start tutorializing that really quickly, because turn around and go back where you came from is not that crazy. we're still pretty grounded in physical reality that we're probably familiar with, well, that we are definitely familiar with. I don't think anyone's out there living in 4 dimensions. But the idea that, you know, the first things are like jump and then you fail and then you progress and then the colors are trippy and then you have a left-right situation, the hallway problem, where the hallway doesn't go anywhere, no matter which way you go, and the game is actively telling you, like, it doesn't matter, this decision is irrelevant because neither of them is the correct option. So that primes you to, like, do something different, and you go backwards. Then it gives you this: when you return to where you have been, things aren't always as remembered. So it's effectively tutorializing you, just in a kind of wordier way. I get, like, they're going for a certain feel, and they're accomplishing that, but effectively what the sign is saying, yes, good, also, this is going to be different now. You went backwards, so now it's different. Right, the state changes. Oh yeah, okay, this is the introduction to the doors. The doors are a big part of the puzzles in this game. And I cannot go backwards. Notice that the reason that there's a door here, not just to introduce me to the fact that there are doors and that they're tied to these, like, laser tripwire things, but also that you can't go backwards. So the solution to the last puzzle, remember, was to go backwards. Then they put you through this door, now I can't go backwards. Some choices leave us running around a lot without really going anywhere. So hit escape, and you go back to the main... Go back to the main room. And then you can start over. Okay, you can teleport around. You don't like where you end up putting into this. So it's setting up now this highly iterative gameplay, which I like. I think that makes sense, and it's important for a game like this because it's trying to get you to do pretty weird stuff. It's trying to get you to do some pretty trippy, weird things that you might not normally do. So the fact that there's iteration and that it plays on that iteration is an interesting concept. I also like it because it's a good example, that hallway problem is a good example of why the hallway problem is a pretty good, like, rule of thumb, but you notice how they took the hallway problem and this idea that the player isn't making a meaningful decision between left and right, and then worked the fact that it's not a meaningful decision into the tutorialization so that the player quickly realizes, I shouldn't be doing that, I should be doing this other thing. Right? But by making it relatively arbitrary, they made it much more likely that the player is going to relatively quickly figure out to go backwards. Pretty good. So walk, it has a question mark, but it works. Go backwards. So that's kind of interesting because the first time you came across here it said jump and it caused you to not get to the other side, which is what I think probably most players would expect, which creates this sort of unreliable narration. And this is interesting because now it works. And the narration is now reliable. Well, it's not reliable, but it was correct this time. But it still gives you this alternative, right? Like, you can still go here, and it's something. There's, I don't know what this is. It's numbers 3, 5, so you can't really go down or go anywhere. It just says up. So this is nothing. All right, never mind. But it gives you something to mess with, which I think is neat because it's set up itself as being kind of an unreliable narrator. The idea that it gives you something else to do is probably good. Now there's an empty room. Okay, so this is another one. This is kind of a hallway problem, but not really, because you have right, which appears to be nothing, and you have left, which appears to be something. Now, most players are going to go, let's see what's down this hallway, since it appears to be a dead end, right? Because they're anticipating that this is going to be, a dead end, they figure we can get here, get answers, and then we'll know what this is. Because it's not so much, oh, I wonder what's down here. It's more, I don't want to go this way without first having exhausted this as a possibility. It's not curiosity as to what's down here, it's an aversion to ignorance more than curiosity. And also, this was something, and it let us go somewhere. Dead end on the south if you don't try to move through it. Can we go back? We can't go back. And this says fly. Okay, well obviously we can't do that. No double jumping. Okay. The first real puzzle. So we go through and we get trapped. At least resistance is a valid option. I don't know what that is. Fun paths are straightforward. Oh, another trippy turnaroundy. Some more trippy turnaroundy nonsense. Yeah. Alright. Oh, we're back to the beginning. Alright, so a lot of what's going on with this game is that, like a big part of it is just creating an expectation and then subverting that expectation. But it's doing it in a way that doesn't... Can I just go through these? Okay. I could probably just go through this forever. It does it in a way where the subversion usually results in progress. Like, the basic loop here is... Oops. Go back. Well, the basic loop here is that you do a thing, it turns out to be wrong, and then you do a different thing and it turns out to be right? Do the thing that is you're not supposed to do is basically the theme. And it's already kind of teaching that. It teaches it pretty quickly. And then there's this highly iterative gameplay once again where we have these different... Because again, you can go back to all these different places, and it shows you, like, this has two connections, right? So it has a map. And the fact that a game like this that plays with physicality to that extent has a map is pretty interesting, and I think clues you in to sort of what the intended experience really is. Because the idea is to think about it as a physical space, but to not be caught up with typical cause and effect. The rules are different. Navigation still occurs, but the rules of how you get from one place to another are different. And the hints to that are in the little pictures on the wall. So let's go back to strength in numbers. Yeah. And then this was, you can't go past here without a thing. And then this. You can, like, yeah, there are clearly different paths that you can see. Going through this changes the doorway. Okay. You have to get through this without touching those, I guess? I'm not entirely sure. Oh, these are breaking the walls. Okay, so is this like a timing thing? I don't think this is a timing thing. This doesn't seem like the kind of game that would do a timing puzzle. Yeah, I don't think so. No timing puzzles in this game. Probably. Oh man, yeah, you use momentum. go. Yeah, and this puts us back to the beginning. Okay, so we're getting into the first actual puzzle. Now, the interesting thing about this is that... Oh, it's nice that it's telling us where the last teleport was. I don't know what this circle is. Oh, that's where we currently are. Okay. This is where we are now, and that was the X was our last teleport. Now it's both. I see. All right, yeah, so it's interesting because we're kind of getting to the first sort of proper puzzle, where we have to start playing with what we're doing. And I don't know how to solve this puzzle. Like, I don't remember anything about this game, really, so... Oh, so this has appeared. This is new. Or maybe I just missed it, but... Oh, so, okay, so see that red one kind of taught us how these work. That was the point. And that probably gets us up there, huh? Yeah. Alright, so I don't think we missed that. I think it showed up. I think that showed up after we got the red thing. Oh, and this is now one of those. Oh, there's like stairs now. Okay. But, you know, this is still blocked off, so. I do remember you need an item. You need like some little... You get items that like mess with the colored blocks. Remember that. These also go down, so we can see if we can go down on this. Sure can. Alright. Yeah, so it's really just a matter of like playing with the tools and just being observant, really. And again, it's really trying to drive that iterative play. Oh look, it's actively telling me now. If you aren't paying attention, you'll miss everything around you. Yeah, so it's basically like, hey, pay attention to this stuff. It matters. Okay. What's this? Alright. So we need to go the other way, maybe. Came from, but we can go down now. Okay, bye. Oh, we got a happy sound, and we have a nice little platforming challenge. Oh, this is so typical. When did this game come out? Does anybody know when this game came out? Does somebody want to Google it? It feels like it's like it feels like it's the perfect like 2012, 2013 era indie game. So something happened, and now we just have to run around and see what happened. Oh man, did I absolutely nail it? Is it 2013? Now this kind of little, first of all, it's made in UDK, which that's a big hint right there. But this little platforming challenge is like, that's so... Indie games of that era, like, all have that exact kind of platforming challenge all over the place. So anyway, we got that little, like, purple block, and basically, that sort of did something, which is something. But as a player, I'm thinking, right, like, that was something that did something. I don't know what, and I need to figure out now, like, what else is different. I have no idea how to solve this, though. I don't actually have a solution at all, because there is nothing. So one of the issues that I'm sort of running into now is, I think this is probably meant to introduce maybe what that sort of, what this kind of interaction is going to look like, or is going to mean. But as I don't currently know it, this is very, It's a puzzle solution that I would call obtuse. And the reason I would use that term is because, I mean, so it's also possible that I've exhausted the possibilities in this room and I just need to leave, which I can do. But okay, let's go back to this. Yeah, so the game has very effectively communicated that something has happened, but there really is no like follow-up to that. If that makes sense. So the game is very effectively communicated that something has changed. But I don't know what this iconography means. Like this sort of the visual language that they've set up in this game so far has not included anything like this, which means that I just don't know how to parse this. It's kind of like if someone says something to you in a different language, you know they're communicating, you know they've said something, but you don't know what the word means. This looks like it connects to something else that we've been in, but I don't know what. And I don't see any sign of that purple cube that flew around, so I don't know. See, I told you I don't remember anything about this game. Yeah, it's very bizarre to me that they would, because now you've noticed that my sort of instinct is to just run around in this area, which is probably the wrong instinct, given what they've taught before. But the problem is, the issue is we saw that purple cube sort of roll along, which visually indicates that it's somewhere nearby. This, I don't know if this had a little gray square in it before. Let's see if this is different. Let's just go the way we were before and see if there's anything different about it. For the jump again. Didn't work last time, but yeah, so where am I? So I'm immediately, like, I'm already kind of stuck. I don't know, maybe I'm just an idiot. That's possible. Maybe this is different now, but like I don't know if it's trying to indicate so it has, here's what it's succeeded in doing. Here's what the game has succeeded in doing so far. The game has succeeded in indicating that the rooms are iterative, that the space is iterative, that situations, you know, with rooms like this, it shows you that the room is iterative. Now, of course, there are places we haven't been yet, and also, technically speaking, this is probably just a different room, but it's identical, so as a player, you're thinking like, ah, this is the same room, but with this difference. But that sort of, okay, it's iterative thing is important, and it drives a lot of what you're doing. But a situation like where I was just in can be an issue, because now we've got a situation where something has happened, but I don't know what. Okay, well, we're here now. So we're just gonna go to a new location. Also, the reason that it didn't immediately occur to me, the reason I didn't immediately remember that this was an option, that there was like another place to go to, was because before I didn't make a terribly meaningful decision about whether I wanted to go this way or the other way. And that is huge, because in this case, the idea of a meaningful decision, it depends on what you mean by that. But in this case, if there's something really interesting over here and something really interesting over here, I'm not saying they necessarily should have done this. I'm just saying if that's the case, then if I sit here and go, oh man, do I want to go to this cool thing or this cool thing? I don't know. And I think about that for a minute. Then later when I get stuck, I'll probably immediately remember that this is a thing, right? That there was a decision that I made here. But because the decision that I made was more like, let's go to the dead end first, because we'll just see if that's anything. And then it was something. It wasn't like a remarkable, memorable moment. But making this decision a memorable moment would do a lot to help the player kind of go back to that point when they get stuck later. The other thing that they could do is somehow visually indicate, if the idea was that you go to the purple square, purple cube, and then come back, you could also visually indicate somewhere here that the purple cube is somehow relevant. They do play a lot with color, so like if, you know, this area was purple or something. For example, when we did the hallway problem, we had the red and the blue hallways, right? If this was similar, but it was the, you know, something and the purple hallways, and then we were dealing with the purple block, we might go, oh, hey, we should do the purple hallway next. I don't know if that would work, but there might, it's probably worth giving the player some kind of additional guidance in this case, even though I understand the idea is to sort of play with that and play with expectation. Just making sure that the player never feels like they don't have any... It's totally within... What am I trying to say? I think what I'm trying to say is it's totally within this game's target experience for players to think something like, I guess I'll go see what that room was. I didn't go in that room yet, so I guess we'll go see... I don't know what else to do, so let's go see what that is. That's far more in line with the target player experience than I don't know what to do here is. And you can help alleviate the I don't know what to do here problem by just doing the things I was talking about, where like if you make that decision really clear, then I remember that there's a hallway I didn't go down, etc. Things like that. Oh, we're back here. Okay, well, let's go backwards. See what happens. Okay, well, can't do anything with that yet. Is this different? Nope. Is this different? Oh man, I can't get this jump. Not really different. So, okay, let's go back. We'll go back here. And we will go down. Can't really go down. This gives us a stairway back up, but that's not... Yes, excellent. I don't have a thing yet. Remember, I need a thing. There we go. We made it. We got down. A little deeper. Maybe found something there. Okay, that's a fall. This little clue encouraging you to like go for simple answers is kind of cute, but you gotta be careful with stuff like that. That I could see someone interpreting that as like, just, you're an idiot. Stop. Oops, your problem can change until you see it. it says ELIF. It's a an advertisement for the explain like I'm 5 subreddit. This little like visual puzzle is actually very clear. See, this is a cool puzzle. This puzzle works well because it is very, very clear on like what the sort of circumstance is. And you have like it very clearly gives you all of the tools that you need to solve the puzzle. And it's a very simple puzzle, but it's a well-designed puzzle. Like a puzzle doesn't need to be hyper complex to be good. It does very well what it's trying to do. Need to place it through. And I mean, these signs tend to be very literal, so. The lines on the wall here are, why doesn't anyone ever tell me these things? Turn it up a little bit. The lines on the wall here are nice. I like that it shows you progress. Like it indicates that you are in fact going somewhere. I got turned around here. I got turned around here. But that's okay. Oh, and then they get rid of the lines to be all trippy. Actually, forward. Oh, hey, this was okay. So this is the beginning. So we made like a big loop, but it's also giving us a new clue. So look forward to find a way. Look a little harder. I'm actually surprised that going backwards isn't a more frequent solution. Also, I think it's interesting that they're clearly trying to create this sensation of like they're very clearly trying to drive the sensation of like, was that always there? And they do that pretty well. And it does make you want to be a little bit more thorough with the way that you investigate your environment. This is actually a really cool way of getting the player to do that, because what it does is it kind of like, it doesn't punish you for not being super thorough, but also when you do something and when you like go back through a place because it's so iterative, and then you realize that there's sort of something else to do, or that there's something else there that you didn't notice before, it makes you kind of feel like you might have missed it, or if it was always there. And they do that really frequently to make you, obviously you don't want to miss things, so it kind of makes you want to be more thorough. Venturing into the unknown can lead to great rewards. I want to watch this game. That's what the game gets out of me for that. The game is very meta, and sometimes it does that very well, and sometimes it does it in a way that's a little weird. So there's something about looking at the arrow through this thing. I don't... Aha! That changes. Ah, that's like a little teleporter thing. Got it. Times to view the world from someone else's perspective. Yeah, the game is big on this idea of like literalizing perspective, which, fair enough. This one's a little different though. This just goes back to that didn't do anything that time. Oh, yes it did. Ah, finally. We finally got the blue gun. Alright, hard enough, and you will get to. So you had to do it like multiple times. Alright, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that one's pretty clear, right? It teaches you how to do a thing, and then it doesn't work the first time. Most players are going to try another time, especially with the absence of any other solution. Right? Like if you inadvertently give your players another possible solution there, they're going to exhaust those potentially before they go back. But the fact that that happens pretty quickly, it's creating an interesting experience of like stumbling upon the solution. I do remember this a little bit. Okay. That one's pretty straightforward. This is sort of... Oh yeah, oh no. This is telling me... Right, this is telling me, like, to do this, isn't it? Stuck. This over time. Oh. Okay. See, that's a nice little get that up more. That's a nice little puzzle. Very simple, right? The tools are very simple, but the solution requires a little bit of lateral thinking, lateral problem solving. Multiple ways to approach a situation. Okay. Well, that's the first thing that succeeded at all, so let's see what happens. Man, a lot just happened. A lot just happened. I'm not clear. Does this open again? No, it does not. Alright. So we have a door. We have this, which is just an elevator. Don't look down. Alright, let's not look down. Let's just... I think probably, I mean, the way this game tends to go, I'm going to assume that it wants us to look down, but, you know. Again, though, if you look in the room, because it's like totally bare, right, where you go and you look up, and it says, don't look down. Oh no, I didn't mean to. I actually did not mean to do that. Let me just There we go. That should be better. Yeah. Hold on. What is going on with this? What is happening? What has happened to my world? Why is OBS is being non-cooperative? Hang on. Let's fix that right quick. Okay. All right. No problem. But again, the whole like, right? You can do this, and then you can turn around and go the other way. Okay. That's what I want to do. So like, again, the whole point here is the idea of, the whole point here is is that it says don't look down, and when you take it literally, it doesn't do anything. But then it turns out to be true. And again, the whole point, like every other clue basically is like you should look at things from a different perspective. So it's all about lateral problem solving. That's basically the function of the game, is to get you in this headspace of seeing solutions in a different light. And that's why everything is so heavily iterative. It has to be iterative, because if it's not, then it's difficult to get people to see things in a different light, because you need to get them in a situation and then change the way they see the situation. Go. Let me go. Let me go. Is this, oh man, do I really have to individually click on all this? Okay. There we go. Man, come on. Okay. Is this that thing where I can like... No, you can't put... Oh, right, these little fields get rid of your blocks. Whoops. Oh well, let's go this way. We haven't been over here yet. Oh, that's something. A bunch of abstract. Hey, look at that! The models and the visuals reflected the theme of seeing different perspectives. That's my analysis. Do you feel enlightened yet? Oh hey, it's the purple block. Alright, let's see what the purple block is all about. Oh, that's gonna take a while. Oh, this is gonna take a while. Already know the good jokes. This is gonna lead to nothing too, probably. Is he okay? Ha! Oh god, this is all gonna be pointless too, I bet. Okay, bye, purple block. Great. We did it. And that's it for this room. Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Oops, I did the wrong way. I should probably just teleport, huh? Let's see. Where were we? Oh, was there? Did I just not see it? Oh, that's no problem. We're here again. Where was the art room? What did I miss? Where's the tunnel? This goes... Oh. Oh, if we go back the way we came, it just changes. Oh, no, it doesn't. This is just this. Into one of the cubes. Okay. Oh, here we go. What do you know? This is doing the same thing where you've got the lines to show progress. That's nice. It's a nice little touch. It makes things feel like you're actually getting somewhere. That's good. So, it's a good foundation. And some of these turns bring me back. Some of them don't. Follow the green. Follow the green. That's what I'm learning. Oh, there's a lot of green. Okay. Never mind. Follow the not red. I think this is a circle. So let's go back to the green. Yeah. So right. Oh man. Right, left. Forward, left. Left. Oh, we got there. We never stop trying. We'll get there eventually. Left, right. Same deal as before. Kind of a hallway problem situation. This time, they're completely identical. Let's go left. Again, look at the visual indicators that you're getting somewhere. Hello. Oh, look, that's cool. The strips get thinner, and it makes you feel like you're going faster. That's a cool little touch. Also, again, helps to make sure that you continue. Feels like you're actually progressing. Raw persistence may be the only option they're giving up entirely. Oh, but we're back here. Maybe it's different now. This place different? Is there? I swear to God, if there's another purple cube. Nah. This is different though. What the? Why did it go away? All right. Well, This is the same though. I played through it once, but it was like years ago. It was when it was still fairly new. I remember like none of it. World looks different on the other side. Yeah, that's true. Oh. Cubes. Oh, they turn blue. That's right, because I have the little blue gun. Now I can put things in here, which doesn't do anything. This is that thing where you need like, oh yeah, the different guns do different things. I need one that like fills it up. Oh yeah, I'm starting to remember some stuff about stuff. Or I don't want to go through that again. I feel like you could probably cheese that door, but I'm gonna try. I was gonna get rid of my beautiful cubes. Oh, but I can just get more. Closes it, but oh, you have to cut off both ends. That makes things more difficult. I don't think I can just brute force this. What a shame. What a shame. I think we need a different gun to get through here. Alright. See what else we got. Too many lasers. Yeah, there are too many lasers. We are actually coming up on the hour mark, though. I think one of the things that I would say in general, this is a very ambient sort of game. And by that, what I really mean is the game is not super concerned with, like, here is the segment. Here's the puzzle. Solve this puzzle. It really is more about exploring the space and understanding the logic that it works under, that sort of governs how everything works. It's difficult to articulate the logic that it uses. I don't fully understand the logic that drives it. But what would be really interesting is to get like what the developers say the logic is supposed to be, because it seems to be a lot about just making it so that the thing that you're doing is the thing that you don't expect. In fact, I think applying a principle like actionable iteration would make this game like would drive its core experience further. Sometimes, if you use it sort of precisely and carefully, because just like it has this sense where like players get this idea of like, was that there always, or did that just show up, or did I just not notice it? That happens quite a bit. But having this idea of something similar where when you solve the puzzle, you realize that you had the tools to solve the puzzle the whole time and you just weren't thinking about it in the right way. Whereas a lot of times I think what it does is it does kind of make it so that you really had to go like get this thing to solve the puzzle. The guns with the different cubes make sense. That's not really what I mean. It's more like when you run into a puzzle, it isn't always clear what the key to the puzzle is, right? It's like that standard like door key relationship where once you run into a door, you know that it's a door, and if the door is locked, like as a player, you understand what a door is and how doors are locked, and you can easily presume there must be a key. The key to these puzzles is not always clear, and then how to achieve or how to obtain those keys is also not clear. And I think to some extent the lack of clarity on those things is part of the atmospheric sort of feel that it's going for, that sort of atmospheric vibe. But the spaces, coupling that with spaces that are very odd to navigate, like just mentally awkward to figure out, especially when you start. This probably alleviates as you play and get more accustomed to it, but this actually might be a game where... actually, you know what? Maybe instead of shifting a lot of these design principles around, maybe a lot of it really just comes down to tutorialization. Because it seems like there's some really cool ideas that I'm not sure... I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out that the developers couldn't even tell you like what the logic is necessarily, which I think as developers it's really useful and important to sort of demystify your own game, and you know it ruins the magic for you as developers, but that's not... You're the developer. The magic is going to be ruined for you if you're doing your job well, generally speaking. And just like having the sense of like, here's the logic of the puzzles and how we want the player to sort of go through it, what the specific thought process is that, or the type of thought process that unfolds, because then you can tutorialize that, because then you can break it down into specific sort of conclusions and types of reasoning that you can then teach. And that's why it feels almost like the developers might not even know the logic, is because it wasn't tutorialized really. Some of the elements were. Some of the more sort of concrete elements were tutorialized. Like sometimes it's going to be weird, like turning around, but really what they did a good job of teaching was that sometimes solutions are going to be quite strange, but they didn't really drive, it doesn't really drive the logic. Yeah, I suppose, but I think it's worth acknowledging, like, it. If you don't sort of like understand the nuts and bolts of your game so well that the magic ends up getting kind of ruined for you, there's a very good chance that you will fail on some level to communicate to your players. And the interesting thing, the unique thing about games as a medium is that the communication with the player is part of it. It's part of the medium. And when you sort of like, you can make a game for yourself, or a game that is sort of meant for you to be part of the, I guess, expression of it. But I think there's a very real potential cost there in terms of if the player is no longer involved because it's not clear. And I think clarity to the player is a really, really important component of that. It's because play and the player decisions are the pillar of an interactive medium. It's and so the communication needs to be clear so that the player decisions are also a communication back to the game. It's not necessarily a communication between developer and player. It's a communication between game and player, and the developer is just in charge of creating the system of communication. What? I don't know Snapshot. Is that a game? Look it up. Go Snapshot on Steam. Oh yeah, I'm just like not familiar with this at all. Yeah, I see. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, okay. I kind of understand what you mean. Yeah, it's, yeah, I agree. I think having a puzzle game where the developers don't really know, yeah, no, I would generally agree. I think puzzle games, although really, I think it applies to, I think really it applies to most games, because like I can't think of a situation where that shouldn't apply, because surely the game should understand, like the game needs to drive the conversation, which means the game needs to understand how the conversation is going to play out. If you don't, then a lot of it just comes down to like, I don't know. I think there's a lot that it just comes down to like, you make a thing and like hope that an interesting conversation unfolds, and that's not necessarily like an inherently problematic approach. But if you're going to put a bunch of time into developing something, then like if it doesn't work out, if it's not clear, then what do you do? Well, okay, yes, generally, although they have a different kind of understanding also, because they have an understanding of how to maximize wins. And actually, RTS games have a strategy games, not necessarily RTS, but strategy games, competitive games. One of the big things that a lot of competitive games are trying really, really hard to do is really try to figure out how to bridge that gap between players who don't really know what they're doing and players who really do know what they're doing, and trying to tutorialize more deeply and more completely, not just like what the units do or how the game works or the mechanics or the rules, but also the deeper strategic understanding and getting players to think a lot more in terms of like build a strategy and then try to then your decisions are all about working toward that strategy and then solving the problems. Like a lot of games are trying really, really, really hard to do that. And it's true that we're not at a point currently where we're really capable of doing that, or where competitive multiplayer developers can fully do that. But clearly they're trying really hard to be able to do that, because if they can, then that raises the skill floor, right? More people are better at the game, and that's generally speaking, the more people who are really good at your game that you have, the more robust the scene is, the more you can allow emergent gameplay. Thanks for that. The more you can allow emergent play, because if you have a lot of really robust players who are really good at it, because you've tutorialized them to be better at it, then something like a shifting and evolving metagame is much easier to maintain, because you have a lot of people who are really good and are constantly trying to solve really high level strategic or tactical problems. So in that instance, understanding the game really, really well is still it's still the sort of platonic ideal of development in that game. It's just that we don't know how to. Just that we don't know how to do that yet. But they're definitely trying. Sure, but you can categorize decisions, right? You don't have to specifically design for every single possible permutation, but you can definitely design for things like this situation will work generally in this way, and here's examples of how that will unfold, and here's how we can make sure that it doesn't do anything else. And that's how you can make it so that units in an RTS have a particular niche, or a character in a multiplayer, a competitive shooter has a niche, by making sure that they don't sort of step on each other's toes, because you understand the categories of everything. Or like in Overwatch, you have the idea of like tank support DPS, right? There's not a lot of examples of players taking a support character and then just totally replacing a DPS. There are examples of strategies that use multiple supports, but as far as I'm aware, there's not a lot of strategies where the support just became a DPS, and if it did, they would generally nerf the character, right? Or shift the character's balance so that like balance becomes the tool for that problem, because if the support can be the DPS, then like DPS player characters don't have as much relevance, and they want to shift that back. Like there's still a very clear sense of how the game unfolds sort of in the abstract. It's like having an abstract where the game works generally like this, and that might manifest in interesting ways. And if we can make it so that those manifestations are the things that people generally watch the game for, then what you can do is, if you do that, then you can create a really interesting spectator game, because players are looking for details, but the designers are looking more for like broad strokes. Do things work generally the way we want, and we don't really care how that manifests in the tiny particulars, right? Like as a designer, you don't plan out positioning on a map. You don't plan out every possible permutation of like a team's positioning on a map, or how every team can set up in every situation on a map. You create possibility space. You understand kind of the broad strokes of how these things are going to play out, and then you give tools for dealing with those, again in the abstract. And then little individual elements will pop up, and it'll depend on like that player's particular affinities and talents and all that. But I think the devs still very much have a pretty strong, like something like Overwatch is successful because the devs have a really strong grasp on pretty much exactly what they're trying to accomplish, even if they don't have 100% control over every single possible detail, because they have such a good control over it, a good handle on it overall, that the details that emerge organically still fall within those categories. And that's really, I mean, that's really impressive. It's very difficult to pull off, and it seems like most competitive games are attempting to achieve something like that, which is why chess is still going so strong, because it is that. You know, there are still people still play novelties in chess, board states that have never occurred in any known database. I mean, they might have occurred at some point in human history, but not in any known database, right? So like, but those particulars don't change the basics of thinking about the game strategically and tactically in terms of things like your pawn structure and how to activate and develop your pieces and things like that, right? Like those are still the core decisions that you're making, even if they manifest in different ways. That was a bit of a ramble, but that was an idea. It was kind of a tough idea to articulate. Tough idea to figure out, really, not even articulate. But, Well, I think the goal there is to figure out, generally speaking, how you want to interact with pieces. So here's a great example, because this sort of nails it, I think, perfectly. Because if you look at the difference between StarCraft 2 and StarCraft Brood War, Brood War is much more chess-like in the way that it plays out, and StarCraft 2 is not very chess-like. Like, there are a few things that are kind of similar, but it's not really. And by looking at the difference between something like, well, that's true, but that makes it difficult. It does make it difficult. Like, it's not an easy problem to solve, but I think the tool is still, try to categorize and frame the problems, and then create examples of the permutations. If you have a really clear idea of what you want and what you don't want and why that'll work, and why that'll create a strategic space, and what that means, that's still going to be a lot better than, because the alternative is basically, let's put stuff together and kind of hope it works out, and if it doesn't, we'll change it. But you still don't, what do you change it to? What parts of it do you change, and what do you change them to? Still is a big problem. But StarCraft 2 and Brood War are an interesting sort of case study almost, because you have this idea of StarCraft 2 is not very chess-like. It's sort of more focused on macro play and things like that, right? There's a huge focus on macro play, whereas Brood War is a lot more. There's a lot more about controlling space and one of the problems that people don't like. One of the things that people don't like about StarCraft 2 is that units tend to clump up, and it doesn't really work very well because space is so difficult to control. You need to devote so many resources to controlling space that you don't get something like pawn structure in StarCraft 2, whereas in Brood War you do get things that are very much like pawn structure, because you can control a lot of space with very few units by comparison. Sure, but you still need a guiding principle, right? You still need guiding principles for what you tweak and how you tweak it, because it's not you can't just make some things and then, right? It's not as simple as make some things and then iterate on it, because if it's just a matter of make some stuff and then iterate on it, what you end up with is okay, this isn't working. And then you have to identify why it's not working. And at that point, you have to come up with a framework for that. But if you have a guiding principle, then your framework is based on those guiding principles, and you're always kind of driving toward the same goal instead of trying to find your goal. I mean, you're always going to be doing some find your goal as you work. There's always going to be some of that. But I think a good goal is to try to minimize the amount of finding the goal there is. You want to spend as little time as possible looking for what your goal is, even though, and you do have to accept that there's going to be some. It's inevitable that there's going to be some, but I think you want to drive toward having as little as possible, where the sort of ideal outcome, even if it's effectively impossible, is that you know exactly what your goal is, what those guiding principles are, how you're going to frame the problem, and how it's going to play out from the outset. That never happens, but that should be the goal. And I think the opposite response would basically be, that's never going to happen, so let's just make some stuff and then see what happens, which I think is I think it's the wrong approach. I think it's the wrong response to that problem. It's kind of like surrender, right? It's well, if that's going to be a problem, then it's going to be a problem, whatever. Just deal with it. I don't think it's an ideal approach, though. It's not that it will never have a good result. It's because you could say, let's say you could turn game development into a skill check, right? Like a D&D skill check, roll a d20, add your modifier, and there's a DC for it. I still wouldn't, even if that was possible, I still wouldn't recommend it as an approach, because you're relinquishing control of your product. You're going, well, I hope I roll well, if that makes sense, in terms of you'll sometimes succeed, but the fact that you sometimes succeed doesn't necessarily make it a recommended approach, because I think the best thing that you can do if you're trying to be the best developer you can be is to find ways to have as much control over your product as possible, and also understand that that's a big responsibility, and that you have to really know what you're doing and really clearly identify your goals and what the tools that you have for accomplishing those goals are, and adopt as much of that responsibility as you possibly can, with the intent of constantly growing the amount of responsibility you adopt, so that you're always working towards adopting all of the responsibility for the gameplay experience, even though you can never actually get to 100%, but you want to drive for 100%, as opposed to skill checks. Sometimes it'll go well, sometimes it won't. The other problem that I have with that is from an educational perspective, because I taught game design for a few years, and one thing that's really, really frustrating to me when I'm teaching game design, or when I went to game design school, is that idea of like, if you take the Slay the Spire approach, then a little bit, but okay. So the education example is actually a great example. Think of it in terms of how to teach students game design, right? Because this is something that's always kind of bothered me, is methods that I've always seen people use for teaching game design have been things like well, pretty much like the Slay the Spire example, where there's a lot of like, make it and just understand that you're going to need to iterate a lot, so be prepared to fail a lot before you get to where you want to be. But I think if you're teaching game design, that's almost worthless advice. It's not 100% worthless advice, but it's almost worthless advice. Because if you're a student and you don't know anything about game design, someone telling you that doesn't really get you anywhere. It doesn't make it so that you can it doesn't empower anybody to make better decisions, to make more coherent decisions, to make more concrete decisions, right? It's a really ineffectual education tool. It has the potential to be okay as a development tool. And if your only goal as a developer is to enjoy development, it's like maximally enjoy the development process, then I think you just have to accept that there's going to be a degree of inconsistency in the product quality that you put out, which is not a trade-off that I accept, and I don't think other people should accept that trade-off either. That's the moral language part, right? That's the moral part that you've identified, as I don't think that's an acceptable trade-off. The method suited to goals part of it is, I think you have to accept that that's going to be a trade-off, because you don't know why your product works. You might think you do. You might have found like commonalities. You might have identified like some correlations, but you haven't adopted the maximal amount of responsibility for the gameplay experience that you could have, and that means that you are dealing with more uncertainty, and that is more than likely going to result in less consistency. And then the moral part of that is, I don't think that's acceptable. I recommend against it because I don't think that's the right approach. I think that's a bad goal. So that might clarify things. Like, it's both, right? There is a moral part where I think that's just a bad goal. But there is the much more practical. The two practical elements are the design education element of like, what does that mean in terms of like, how do you use that to teach future designers? Because it doesn't, like, that doesn't help future designers, because it's like, look, well, they made cards that they felt like were fun and then they tweaked them. Yes, but having guiding principles allows you to build predictive hypotheses about your design. And if you build cards that seem fun and then react to them, you don't have an idea of why these things will work if they work, and why they don't work if they don't work, and what it looks like if they work or don't work. So when I say take responsibility for your design, I mean things like put in the time to build a really coherent, falsifiable concept, and then test that. I'm not saying you shouldn't iterate. You're absolutely going to need to iterate, and you're going to be wrong about a lot of things. But adopting the responsibility looks like design statements that are provably correct or incorrect. So when I talk about like objectivity in design, which I do a lot, that's usually what I mean, is making statements that are provably true or false, or as close to provably true or false as you can really get. Yeah. And I just don't. I'm not a fan of the idea of iteration. Is a crucial tool, but it's not the foundation of design. Like, without it, you would be kind of screwed. But I'm not sure that's true. I mean, I think a lot of what I describe is like, this is the path to improve design as a field. Like, as a it's almost like, as a species, we just don't know very much about game design yet. We're still sort of struggling through that. And I think part of the goal is to advance the collective understanding of game design. Like, I think that's part of what we need to be collectively pushing toward, which doesn't necessarily mean that every individual should be pushing for that, although I would consider it, I don't know, artistically virtuous, let's say, to push for that. It's not necessarily an artistic obligation to push for that, but I do think it's worth pushing for, and I think, and that's where the education part of it comes in, is if you're teaching your future generation of designers, I think it's about driving, hey, we have this really interesting, really intricate, really complex sort of system with a lot of really complex interactions that seems to be very emergent from a highly iterative, abstract process. Can we find a way? Can we develop a process, or invent a process, or find a framing that allows us to achieve similar results on purpose every time? And that is an educationally virtuous approach, right? Because if you get the process that was used to make Slay the Spire, that is educationally less valuable than a really dedicated, clean, concrete process that is built off of hypothesis. And I think the educational element of that is actually a really important consideration. Like, that's one of the considerations that matters to me the most, because that's less about how can we make the best games right now today, although it's also about that. But that's really secondary. The primary concern is this going to drive like future generations in a direction where we can make a really concrete, really good, really clean can we make really good progress on like our collective understanding of design as a craft? I don't think we'll ever get to the point where it's all broken down to a complete science, but I think driving for that is the right approach. It's like a meta process. Because it might not, you're probably right. It's not capable of reaching a result like Slay the Spire, but that's why we need to work on it and improve it so that it is. That's the short version. What do you mean by take my position? Like, how should they interpret it? Well, I think the thing that's most important is the more conscious understanding we have of what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to accomplish that, the better understanding of the craft we will achieve, both individually and, let's say, culturally. Although it will affect us culturally more than individually for some people, because there are some people out there who have a really strong design intuition, and they have this tendency to sort of see the solution but not really be able to articulate why it works. But it's not necessarily everyone's independent responsibility to articulate why it works. It's just really important that there are people who can do that. And I think developers are a good place to start with that. Critics are a great place to start with that. That's why I like this was kind of that was kind of the foundation of my critique of Mark Brown's video last week. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is the more concrete understanding we have of our process and how we think that process is going to result, what we think that process is going to result in, the more we can control that process on a conscious and specific level, which will allow us to understand game design as a craft better. And I think that definitely applies to individuals, especially individuals who are just starting out and don't have any experience yet, like a student, right? If there's a student in a school, like they don't have any experience or knowledge about game design at all, really. And having concrete processes for them is like, I don't see an alternative, really. Telling someone to just iterate a lot is like, do well if you're going to do well and don't if you aren't. That was a little bit rambly. My voice is starting to get tired and I'm getting like extra rambly. I don't know if that made any sense, but hopefully it did. But it's really about, like, I'm concerned about the future of game design. How does it make it? I mean, it depends. Understanding the tool is always going to be better than not understanding the tool. And I think most of what I'm advocating for is going to result in a better understanding of the tool, regardless of whether you agree with the goals. And understanding the tool from a perspective of like cause and effect is, I feel like that's the only I don't know, meta tool. Call it a meta tool. That's probably a word. It's probably not. Maybe it is. Whatever. It's like all we have, really. Like intuition, see, I don't see intuition as a tool really. It's a convenience that some people enjoy, but you can't use intuition as a tool because you can't go from a person has really good intuition to now I'm better at design. There's no bridge between those things. And education, that's where the education sticking point comes in, because that's part of what I consider really important is the education of design, which requires a very sort of concrete approach. It basically requires a scientific approach. Because the people who don't require a scientific approach, if you tell people to just iterate, and some people are good, they didn't need your advice. Like, they were going to figure that out, and they were going to be good anyway. Good educational tools take people and make them better than they would have been without your input. That's a big part of what I'm concerned about is this is the educational element. Starting to get really rambly. It's hot as hell in this room. I had to close the door because that's got the sound thing on it. And I'm in this tiny room with the computer running and the stream going. It's so hot in here. And we're approaching the 2-hour mark. I should probably call it a day for this before I collapse from my own stupid constraints, my own horrible spatial design. Where there's no ventilation, there's no natural light, no airflow. This is awful. Anything else? I think we're gonna shut this down in a minute here. So if there's anything else, like, now's the time. I gotta get out of here. I gotta get outside for a couple minutes before I'm like a dog in a car, you know. It's like too hot. Somebody break the window and get me out. Today was interesting. That was very interesting. I appreciate your perspective, though. I do. Like, I get it. I get what you're saying, because you're saying, like, if the goal is to, I don't want to use the word indulge, but if your goal is to sort of create and enjoy the creation, that's not the right articulation. If the goal is to create and engage with the creation yourself as the creator and feel sort of invested in it, and appreciate the fruits of that labor yourself, then the attempt to break it all down into, like, basically trying to make it as quantitative as possible so that you have, like, the mathematical formula for this gameplay experience kills that for you, and it potentially kills it for players too, because you might overly restrict them. You might you risk doing things like killing emergent gameplay, which is the driving factor behind some games. Like, I appreciate that perspective. I don't think it will. I don't think it will do those things for the most part. I think that's right. I attempted to represent the position fairly and accurately. Hopefully that was at least close. Goodness. My goodness, it's too hot in here. I have to shut down. I have to shut down. No, you're probably right. You're probably right, it's not. You're stuck with text. There's a delay, it's awful. Yeah, no. We're gonna call the stream there before I collapse. Okay, like it's really hot in here. It's like 100 degrees Fahrenheit in here. Goodness. Okay, that's it. That's it for this event today. We're done. Go home. I gotta get out of here before I die. Get some water. Roll down the windows. Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye. Well, you know what? Go more home. I don't know. I don't know. All right? I'm leaving. Goodbye. I can never find my buttons. I'm so bad at this. Jesus. Okay.